neighbor amongst the other classmates who are on this panel, and I am a Classical Conversations Director in the Winter Garden North community.
My name is John Sullivan. I'm a youth pastor at Cornerstone Church in Davenport, Four Corners area. Jocelyn made me come.
My name is Kathy Mallory, and I was invited by Rachel St. Angelo, and I am a volunteer at University Presbyterian for the youth, in the youth department, I mean.
Nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more, so that we may fear less, says Marie Curie. Living life with constant fear can produce many outcomes, such as a paralyzed state of mind, severe distress, anxiety, depression, trouble with discernment, or life-altering changes. All transgender athletes should not be treated as equal to cisgender athletes for these reasons. Humans are not created equally, humans are not to assign themselves genders, and humans are not accepted and loved by all. Some people believe that transgender athletes are entitled to compete against cisgender athletes in whichever gender they identify with because they have the right to compete, quote, equally. However, all transgender athletes should not be treated as equal to cisgender athletes because there are biological advantages for transgender athletes which disrupts the once equal playing fields like never before. With the rise of transgender athletes competing in sports over the past 45 years, the rules and regulations in sports have been challenged to be redefined. And now stand ready for questions.
Hi Rachel, how you doing?
Good.
Very good. All right, so my spiritual gift is being critical and judging. So what I'm trying to be as very positive that Jocelyn doesn't know me as in these things. Number one, I agree with you completely. My first question for you would be, who were you writing your senior thesis to? Who was the intended target audience?
I guess it was just to my peers or people who were passionate about sports and rules that wanted to know how to make the playing fields equal and ensure justice and fair play within sports.
Cool. So I wrote down a whole bunch of notes. I'm going to go through page by page, just 7 paragraphs on there. Okay, I'm going to be nice. So there was on, I believe it was page 2, you had written that allowing biological males to compete against the gender they wish to identify as deprives women of their rights and violates their hard-earned freedom. When you talk about women's rights in sports and women's hard-earned freedom, where did that originate from? Was that from your heart? Was that from stuff you've experienced?
So this idea it's partially from my heart, also from research too. I just don't want to use my emotions and feelings, so I had researched that backed up what I believed. But this goes back to some of the other information I found, later in my paper I talked about the example of the Boston Marathon, how they changed the rules, and males can compete against females in the women category and have the same qualifying time. So that was just one example of how...
It was 30 minutes.
Yeah, it was 30 minutes.
3 hours and 3 minutes.
Men could run 30 minutes slower and compete in a women's category. So that was just an example of how I believe, in my opinion, how women's rights were being taken away just because a man chose to identify as a woman and could be in their category.
Good. On page 3 at the bottom, I really like the example that you had written. It says, for example, man cannot choose which family he is born into, or the age he is, or the specific time period of history he lives in. So man does not have, therefore, the right to choose his gender. I like that question that is stated there, because I am a 65-year-old Asian woman. Right? No, it's preposterous to understand that, or to think that. So in there, when he says that a man cannot choose his nationality, nobody would dare look at me and think that I'm Asian or Hispanic. I really don't know what I am. But I'm not a 65-year-old woman. And so just putting that in there I thought was a great kind of a jab. I kind of like those little undertones, little sneaky little things. I did like, though, in the Boston Marathon part, you'd said some stuff about it being fair. And it isn't even the fact that it's, we just don't want men fighting against women in MMA. We want to provide fair competition. So are you in sports? Is this where this kind of...
Yeah, originally I was interested, like how I chose my senior thesis topic. I knew I was going to be working on this for a long time, and I was going to do a lot of research. So first I wanted to do something that I was passionate about, and I'm really passionate about sports, specifically track. It's my favorite sport. And second, I wanted to do something that was kind of controversial and something I didn't really know a lot about, and I wanted to educate myself better before I formed an opinion, because I didn't really have a solid opinion and reason to back up what I believe, so that's why I chose this topic.
Okay. On page 4 at the bottom, you started talking about Jaron Jennings, and at the very bottom, it's actually an excerpt from a conversation that he had. I'm going to keep saying he. Sorry, that's my spiritual gift. That he says that when he was 3 years old, he would say the words, "I'm a girl." I have a 9-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy, and anywhere in their lives have they ever come out and told me that they're boys. That sounds manufactured, as if, I've worked with kids my entire life, and I've never heard some little boy walk in and say, "I'm a boy." It's just not common conversation. They're like, "Hey, you like trucks? I like trucks." So I'm glad you put that in there, because just right in there, it seemed overly manufactured that this boy was at 3 years old saying, "Hey, I'm a boy." So I actually wrote down manufactured as the word. I highlight things that are crazy. Now I'm going to be nice here. So page 5, I got confused. So on page 5, you start talking about Jazz Jennings, and you talk about gender dysphoria. One thing I would have added in here is giving a definition of gender dysphoria. Maybe I read over it. Did I? Okay. Of talking about that did I miss that? Or?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned a condition that leads a person to disconnect from their biological sex and their gender identity, causing one to feel an abundance of stress, discomfort, and arousal.
Yeah, my bad. So, you go, girl. You got this. So, one of the things that you could have added, and this is the part where but one tidbit, because if you're trying to convince other people, the reason I asked the question is, who are you directing this to the saved or to the lost? As a Christian myself, if I am going to the unsaved, to atheists, to whoever, and I present to them what I believe in my foundation is the Bible, well, they don't believe the Bible. So when you start using cool big words like gender dysphoria, you are now given an opportunity to go scientific on them and go and talk to them about what the actual general psychological magazines and stuff that they use, that this is a bad thing, that gender dysphoria is linked with the same thing of anorexia. And so I'm glad you used the words in there. You didn't just say transgender, because transgender is that hot button topic.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it. It's really
there's so much to it that we just hear transgender and we don't look at, well, what does that mean? Is that just somebody who's dressing up differently? Now, I was confused, again, as I just was with the previous thing with the definition, because perhaps I didn't read it right. So if my question here is wrong, come right back at me like you just did. You did awesome. Who are you looking over at? Mom and Dad? Family? Cell phones? How's it going? You're doing great. So, the way it came across in the article is that you were painting Jaron in a bad light because of transgenderism, right? Okay, I get that. Now, in the next paragraph, you wrote the words, "now look." And so if I look at my son Ryan, I say, Ryan is a really, really good student. And then I look over at Josh and I say, now look at Josh. It makes us think that we're painting Josh in a negative light. Or if, man, Ryan's a really bad student. However, Josh is a good student. So in that phrasing, it came across that you were painting James Charles in a very, very positive light compared to Jaron. So my question is, why are you painting James Charles in a positive light compared to Jared?
So the reasoning between like the two people why I wanted to include them is because there's not a lot of, I wanted to pick people that were close to my age or young, and they're both like 18 and 19 years old, they're both born male, and the reason I wanted to make such a big contrast is whether or not I necessarily agree with the life choices they've made. Jazz Jennings took significant measures to permanently alter his body versus James. I wanted to use the example of the way he accepted him, whether or not he should have accepted him the way or go to the extremes he did, the way he was, I guess you would say, satisfied with how he was, and he didn't have to change himself completely to accept himself and be happy with the way he was. So that's why there was such a big contrast between the two.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Going to another, students who read this today know who James Charles is. And the difference and it's my opinion, but it's also the way the world would see it. James Charles is a homosexual, bisexual man. And he's the makeup guy, right? Yeah. And so I get that you are approaching Jaron on the aspect of competing in sports because it's not fair, because he's physically possibly able to, defeat a girl in the same sport. But that was the question of who you're writing this to, the saved or the unsaved, because in an argument, if you are putting down transgender, but then you're uplifting a homosexual, it's almost the same thing. So to me, it confused me. And that was the reason why I wanted to go there. It just confused me as to why you would seemingly uplift Jaron, but then downplay James, uplift James and downput Jaron. That was just confusing to me. That was just to me. Okay. So yeah, I put in there more stuff about that. I did like that you said that genetics can't be changed. And this was a quote from Walt Hyde, on page 6, the italicized paragraph, that he said, "Feelings, however, can and do change." And I thought that was very smart, especially in highlight with Jaron, who is only 18. When I was 14, I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle. Right? So if my parents had gone off and done that and allowed me to experiment myself and try to get turtle skin and a turtle shell surgically enhanced, 4 years later, I didn't want to be a Ninja Turtle. Okay, it was a Power Ranger 4 years later. I thought it was really, I thought that it was great that you made sure you highlighted this guy who had gone through the gender reassignment surgery. I thought it was really, really a smart play to say, listen, there are so many people who have done this, who thought this is the answer. And so I wanted to, after my negative comment about the James Charles, I wanted to uplift you in that.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I included that just because I really had to dig for this article. It was one of the later articles because I only heard like positive stories about people after their sex reassignment surgery. It was like really positive and stuff, but I didn't hear any challenges. So I just had to do more research to see the benefits of it and if you were actually, safe. And
in your research, because I'm a youth pastor, so I deal with 12-year-olds through 28-year-olds, because apparently youth covers that. Have you done any research on the suicide rate of men or women who claim to be transgender before surgery? Have you looked at the suicide rate before?
I haven't done a whole lot of research in that. It wasn't really in my topic, but
okay.
I've saw some statistics, but I wasn't really focused on it.
The only reason I bring that is because you were saying that all the articles painted in a positive light. And so I was thankful that you talked about how this guy went through it and came back, because the suicide rates don't change, is the answer. That before surgery, it's a 40% suicide rate for transgenders, and then after surgery, a couple years later on, it's still a 40 to 45% suicide rate that they realize it doesn't change anything. So yeah, I wrote, at the end you wrote down, everyone can agree that they can be accepted, this is page 9, that they should be accepted and loved for who they were created to be. However, Christians often live a double standard. I'm glad you wrote that. You said, be the change in the lives of the next generation. Love radically and make a positive difference in the transgender community like never before. So my question was, and this is my last question. Have I been okay? You've done great. How would you suggest that your generation can be that positive difference in the transgender community?
I would say some of the first steps to becoming a positive difference in the transgender community, and I'm speaking specifically from the church and a Christian standpoint because I am a Christian, I would say treating them more as a person because they were just like you and I. We are all created in God's image, and still treating them as a person and getting to know them and understand where they're coming from and hearing their story. I think that would be like a really important starting point to make a difference is starting with relationships and understanding them.
Rachel, you've done great. One last question. I said that like 3 times ago. How would you then, because everybody in the world is trying to accept transgenders into whatever kind of sport they want to, how would you go about judging that or validating whether that man can punch a woman in MMA? Because that's the most extreme I can think of, right? Like, I don't want to get punched, right? I don't like that. How would you suggest, or what do you know what they are attempting to judge and validate, allowing a man to participate in a woman's sport?
So are you asking what you have to do to transition over to another category you choose to identify with? Like what are the qualifications?
In the sport. So in track, if I want to beat you in a race, and I'm a man, and I want to participate against you, what do I have to do?
So there's a lot of different standards for different organizations. I know the Olympics, you have to do 2 years of hormone therapy and have had sex reassignment surgery, and then you can transition over to whichever gender you want. That's just like the biggest thing is the Olympics, and I know smaller organizations and clubs have different rules, and they aren't necessarily as accepting, but I know that's the Olympic rule.
So you're saying that we don't know. There are different clubs, different sports. We're like,
Yes.
oh, by the way, just 2 years ago.
There's not like one governing body that just has a standard, that set of standards for everything. Just because I personally don't believe it is possible to make this a fair play when you incorporate transgender people because there's a levels of testosterone and it's imbalanced. So.
Great, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Hey, Rachel. So, I really commend you on this topic. It's definitely very controversial. I'm sure it's gonna get more deep as time goes on. What are they gonna do? What are people gonna do? So, what were some of the resources that most strongly affirmed your conclusion?
I think the resources that strongly, I would say kind of, a lot of times I had to a lot of it was like from my heart towards the conclusion because I was kind of like summarizing what I learned over the past few months and what I've been researching. And I guess resource, what I did was what I do a lot is try to understand both sides of an argument and understand like the root issue of the problem, because you can put band-aids on wounds and they won't necessarily heal, so that's why that was I guess you could use it as a resource of just analyzing everything and trying to find the root issue and figuring out solutions.
Fair enough. What were some of the resources that most strongly challenge your position?
I think some of the articles I read that was most difficult for me was how different, I kind of mentioned this earlier, how different leagues and organizations all have different rules and standards, and some people believe it is fair and some people believe it isn't fair for transgender athletes to change genders and move into different categories and compete in whichever gender they choose to identify with. that was a really big, I guess, challenge for me, and also just because there was some sports where maybe I would have been more okay with people competing against, but then there's a lot of different variables in sports, whether it's football, soccer, track. All those sports are completely, they're all sports, but they're completely diverse, and some have contact, and the level of contact's different. And personally, I couldn't find a way to make one rule to make everything fair, so that was probably the most challenging thing while trying to prove my thesis.
So how is your thinking different now at the close of this project than it was at the beginning?
I would say I've become a lot more aware of rules and rights, specifically in sports, and how just to be more accepting and accommodating for other people, whether or not, while keeping things fair and just, and the importance of understanding where people are coming from and their backstory